Okay, this is the outside of our percent Foldie. We're going to start by talking about what percent means. We can break percent down into two parts. The word has two parts. The per part means out of, and the cent part means 100. So percent actually means out of 100. So to explore that with a picture a little bit, I have a 100 grid. There are 100 squares. It goes 10 squares this way and 10 squares that way. So let's count how many squares are shaded in. In the top row you have 10. Second row makes 20, 30, 40, and then one more. So we could write this as a fraction by saying 41 over 100. Now, if we're reading this, this is actually the number 41 hundredths. Now, we can write hundredths pretty easily as a decimal. So let's do that really quick. We'll put the 0 in the decimal place in. So 41 hundredths would look like this. The second decimal place is the hundredths place. This is the tenths place. This is the hundredths place. So one more way that we can write this number is using percents. So since this is 41 hundredths and percent just means out of 100, we could also write this number as 41%. So this is all different ways to write the same number. Okay, inside our Foldie, we have some more examples with the pictures. So here's our 100 grid. And let's just take a look at how much is shaded. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 whole rows. So that's 80. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 single squares. So the fraction is 84 out of 100, 84 hundredths. If we write it as a decimal, it would be 0.84. And then the percent is 84%. I will point out that usually we reduce the fractions, but for this exercise we're going to leave it as hundredths. Let's look at the next problem. If we count, we have one whole row, so that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares shaded in. So that fraction, we would have 66 shaded squares out of 100 total squares. And we read that as 66 hundredths. When we write that as a decimal, the 6 right here would go in the hundredths place, and the 60 would go in the tenths place, so that's 0.66. The percent also means hundredths. It means out of 100. So we would write that as 66%. Moving down to the next problem, we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 3 squares. So 43 out of 100, which is 43 hundredths. If we write as a decimal place, the 3 would go in the hundredths place and the 4 would go in the tenths place, and we could write that as 43%. Moving down to the last example with the squares, we have 10, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 28 out of 100. And that would be written as 0.28, which is 28 hundredths, written in decimal form. And then that would be 28%. One example that's not listed here that I want to talk about is if we do not have any tens but only ones. So we're going to draw a quick picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We'll make that into 10 this way. And then I'm going to divide it in half. That's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Let's make sure I've got 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good, we've got 100. Let's say that we only have 3 little squares shaded in. If there's only 3 little squares shaded in, then the fraction would be 3 out of 100, which is 3/100ths. And when we write our decimal, we would have to make that 0.03. This is 3/100ths, because remember that this is the hundredths place. And then our percent, because it's 3/100ths, would be 3%. Okay, in the third part of our Foldie, we have some percent circles. So let me explain what each of these circles represents. Instead of having 100 squares, we have a circle that's is divided into 100 pieces. So each of these little marks is 1/100th or 1%. So we've been coloring fractions for a long time. If I want to color in a half of a circle, I can do that this way. I'm using my highlighter. And if we look at the whole circle, we can see just how many hundredths that would be. So each of these little wedges have 10 marks in them. This little mark is 5 and then 10. So this would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So we could write this as 50 hundredths, which is an equivalent fraction to 1/2, because 50 is half of 100. And in order to write that as a percent, we would just write it as 50%. So a half equals 50%. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Now on the next problem, they want us to divide this into fifths. So we have 10 wedges. So if we put 2 of those together, that'll make fifths. So this is 1/5. This little piece is a fifth. This is a fifth. And this is a fifth. Let's just color this part in. So we've divided it up into 5 pieces. It kind of looks like a sand dollar. So let's see how many hundredths that is. This would be 10, 20. So we could write that as 20 hundredths. And 20 out of 100 is the same thing as 20%. So 1/5 is the same as 20%. Okay, let's look at the next one. So this one says 3/10. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parts already. So we just have to color in 3 of those. 3 little pizza slices. So if we're looking at how many hundredths that would be, here's 10, 20, 30. So that would be 30 hundredths, which is an equivalent fraction to 3/10. And 30 out of 100 is the same thing as 30%. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, the next example says 1/4. So we need to divide the circle into 4 pieces. So we'll draw a line from top to bottom this way that divides it in half. And then we also need to divide it in half this way, which will be going halfway through these little pizza slices there on the side, but that's okay. 1/4 means that we're going to color in 1 piece. And then we can figure out what that percent would be. So here's 10%, 20%, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it lands right in the middle of that piece. So 10, 20, 5. So this would be 25%. Now we can also write that as a decimal. So 25% is 25 out of 100, 25 hundredths, which would be just 0.25, 25 hundredths in decimal form. Oh, I went off the screen a little bit. Here we go. So 25% means 25 out of 100, 25 hundredths, which would be 0.25. All right, let's look at the next one. So the next one on our Foldie is 3/4. So we need to divide the circle into fourths again. But this time we're going to color in 3 sections. Like this. So let's figure out what percent that would be. Each one of these is 10%. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and then this is half of one of those pieces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this one will be 75%. And we can write that as 0.75. All right, here's our last example, 1/3. This is the most challenging one because it's not easy to divide 100 pieces into thirds. So what we're going to do with this problem is we're going to use a little long division. So there are 100% all the way around the circle. And I'm not exactly sure where I need to divide this. So I'm going to take those 100%, the 100 little pieces, and I'm going to divide it into thirds, into 3 pieces. So 3 does not go into 1, but 3 will go into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. We subtract that, we get 1. Bring down the 0. And then 3 goes into 10 again, 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. We subtract, and we get 1. If we write this in fraction form, this 1, our remainder, would mean that we would have 1/3 left over. So what that means is we're going to need 33 1/3% for each little third piece. That also means that this is going to be 33 1/3%. So we solved it a little differently, but I'll show you on the picture. So I could go 10, 20, 30, and then just another 3, a little bit more pieces. It's hard to do 33 1/3 on here, but that would be about 1/3. And then I could go this way, 10, 20, 30, and then 3. And you sort of divide it up like a peace sign. And we're going to color in just 1/3. So we found that this is 33 1/3%. Another way that we could go with this long division is we could have put a 0.0 and brought it down, and you would see that we would keep getting 10s, and we would keep having 3s. So another way to write this percent would be 33.3 repeating percent. And then we can easily change that to a decimal because that would just be 0.3333, and that would keep going. So the decimal for this would just be 0.3 repeating with a little repeating bar above it.